Well, these are certainly interesting times in which we are living. I would venture to say there is hardly anyone living on the planet today for whom life has not been in some way significantly altered since last February and early March. Who among us could have predicted 1 year ago that the year upcoming, 2020, would look like it does and reshape our lives, our daily lives, as it has? The facts are sobering. In less than 9 months, a disease most of us had not heard of or were paying attention to has caused the death of over 1 million people worldwide and 214,000 in our own country, 3,500 of our fellow South Carolinians. And that grim statistic goes up daily across the globe, in our country, in our state, and our local community. I hope there's no one still out there calling this pandemic a hoax. The spread of this disease and the efforts on the part of those of us who take it seriously and follow the best advice of the scientists and infectious disease professionals has altered the landscape of our lives. Medical professionals and hospital support staff have been brought to light as now the brave soldiers on a battlefield. Perhaps they have always been, but we have not recognized. Are coming and going as we please, whether it be to a restaurant to eat or a store to shop or church to worship, has changed for all of us. We've utilized technology to help maintain our connections more than any of us ever expected. Persons sick have been kept apart from loved ones, and our methods for celebrating end of life for loved ones has been restricted. The economy has suffered, jobs lost, businesses closed, and many have turned to the support of government assistance for the very first time. We here at South Main have seen so many new faces coming to receive food through our daily distribution. The economic effects are still coming to some as the rippling impact of closures and slowdowns make their way across a global economy. There is a word for the times we are in: crisis. Crisis. The word comes from the Greek, meaning decision. Crisis is a point in time requiring decision. Crisis culminates in decisive moments. Leaders are in positions where the decisions they make affect us all. We look to leadership to guide us and model for us the best response in the crisis. But we're all confronted with decisions to make. Do I stay home or go out? When I go out, do I follow practices that we've been told help to protect us and those around us or not? How much should I alter my way of living? And who can I trust to give me accurate information on which I make decisions? How do I keep myself and my family safe and still make a living or send my kids to school? There are so many decisions we are pushed to make, and so many unanswered questions about our future. How long will this pandemic last? When can we get back to some kind of normal? What will it take? Will this crisis in some way change our way of living forever? These unanswered and in some cases unanswerable questions contribute to a general sense of anxiety in our world that in itself feeds the crisis. President Franklin Roosevelt, famously quoted one day, said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." That perhaps has not rung more true than it does today, since he spoke those words in the spring of 1933. What we decide to do in response to this crisis, or any other crisis for that matter, the choices we make will be determined largely by how we see things. What are we looking for? Where is our focus? Through what prism do we view the world and our lives and these times? The author Michael Lindvall tells the story about an 8-year-old, a boy named James, who, like many of us at that age, found companionship with an elderly couple who were neighbors. Their names were Angus and Minnie. James showed up at their house shortly before Halloween in a particularly glum mood. It would seem that James's mother had bought his Halloween costume that day and made the decision on his behalf that he would dress up as a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. What his mother failed to realize was that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were now passé, out of fashion this year in the world of 8-year-olds. So Minnie comforted James with stories about costume fashions in the old days when they were children, and James took the idea of simplicity and decided that Minnie's suggestion of becoming a ghost with one white sheet and 2 strategically cut eye holes was an 8-year-old dream. So on trick-or-treat night, Angus and Minnie helped little James into his ghoulish get-up that Minnie had prepared, and they sent him on his way. Well, just a few steps into his travels, James tripped over an evergreen shrub, but managed to recover and proceed ahead with the enthusiastic pace that is characteristic of an 8-year-old seeking unlimited candy treasure. Just a few hundred yards further on his journey, though, James ran smack dab into a boxwood elder tree, and it was so hard, he hit it so hard he dropped to the ground, half passed out. Well, Angus rushed out to James's side to find out. James, he hollered, "Are you all right?" When he reached the little boy and looked down, he realized that the eye holes of the costume were not lined up with his little eyes, not even close. Poor James couldn't see a thing. So Angus reached down and he adjusted the costume so that the boy's eyes lined up with the holes in the costume. And little James opened his eyes and, surprised, he said, "I didn't know I was supposed to be able to see." Isn't this a familiar scene? You know, we are all guilty of this very thing at times. Running full speed ahead, thinking we know what we're about, thinking we know our plan in life. Things are going along well as we run full speed ahead and snack dab into the box elder tree of life. And we're knocked flat. Sometimes we trip over the evergreen bushes of life, and like James, we just pick ourselves up when we get going again. But when we run into the box elder tree, there isn't anything we can do but desperately wonder why. And how could this have happened? And how can I possibly take my next step? In our scripture from Isaiah this morning, the prophet is speaking to a people who had faced and were facing some desperate times. They had experienced crisis after crisis. In the 8th century BC, the brutal Assyrians had overran the northern kingdom of Israel and taken the 10 lost tribes of Israel into captivity. The chosen people of God were shaken to their roots. How could such a thing happen to them? What about the promises that Yahweh, their God, had made to them that were supposed to be unshakable? No doubt among the Israelites, many were angry. This was not how life was supposed to be. They looked around and in the midst of crisis, they saw a world of betrayal, a world in which they felt shortchanged and robbed, a world where bad things seemed to happen, if not to the good people, to the rule players and to the chosen ones. Anger is often a strong emotion in the midst of crisis. The decision to act according to anger can lead to dangerous decisions. The last time we faced these sorts of crises, economic, social crises in our world, to the point we are today, was the 1930s. We would do well to read up and become informed students of history of those days. Different parts of the world reacted to those times and decided differently to the conditions of the Great Depression. In America, we elected a leader who tried to appeal to the hope that we had as a people, and who through these times created initiatives and programs to make people's lives better. The Social Security program, which gives great stability to persons in the latter days of life, and something I'm looking forward to in about 7-8 years down the road, that program grew out of this period, the Great Depression. But in Germany and in Italy and in Japan, in the 1930s, leaders arose who appealed not to hope, but to people's grievance, to their anger. In Germany in particular, a dangerous figure named Adolf Hitler captured the fear of a people and translated that fear into a hatred, which led to the annihilation, to the killing of more than 6,000 million Jewish citizens and to other so-called unacceptables based on race and religion and sexual orientation and culture. In times of crisis, we have to choose between cooperation and isolation. In times of crisis, we have to choose between accusation or transformation. In times of crisis, we have to choose between hope or despair, between hatred or love. The choices we make depends on the view we take. Isaiah came as a prophetic leader to the people of God, challenging their view of the world. He was able to do this because Isaiah himself had a view that was grounded in faith in a God who was bigger and more magnificent and more powerful and more gracious and more loving than imagination could conceive or any oppressive world force could ever defeat. So our challenge this morning is to see the world, to see this crisis and other crises which may be overshadowing our personal lives through the eye holes of faith. Our challenge is to decide according to the measure of trust in God's goodness, to the measure of compassion for our brothers and sisters in the family of humanity, and to the measure of hope that a brighter tomorrow is ahead. Isaiah challenged his listeners to see a God who throws a feast for all the people of the world. Yes, God indeed does care what's happening right here in the United States of America, but God equally cares what's happening to his children on the continent of Africa, or in the sands of Iraq or Afghanistan, or on the islands of Asia, or in the tundra of Russia, and across the globe. And the best lesson we can learn out of this crisis is the truth, the profound truth of this statement. We are all in this together. The notion of every man for himself is perhaps the most dangerous of all ways to see the world right now. There is in these times a strong tendency to see the proverbial glass being half empty. There's a pall of gloom that can darken our worldview and deflate our capacity to create positive change. There's a pull toward a sense of ineptitude and powerlessness, but God calls us to a different view. Perhaps we could be like the young man in an ad that ran on television actually a few years back that I remember so well. It was a boy with a bat and a ball in his hand. And he says, "I'm the greatest batter of all time." And he throws up the ball and he takes a swing and he misses. Strike one. Well, he repeats the scene. And he says, "I'm the greatest batter of all time." And he throws up the ball and he takes a swing and he misses. Strike two. Well, this time, he gives it his very best shot. And he licks his hand and he adjusts his cap and he says, "I'm the greatest batter of all time." And in slow motion, you see him throw the ball up, take a big swing, and he misses a third time. Strike three. He's out. Well, he looks directly into the camera and he says, "I'm the greatest pitcher of all time." It's all about the view we take and what we look for. Yes, these are challenging times that we must take seriously the crisis in which we are in. But may our prayer today be, God, help us see the world and our lives through the eye holes of faith. Amen.